This is DawgNation Postgame, live from the UGA bookstore in Athens. Brought to you by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, Sir Charo's, Lassiter Tractor, Jittery Joe's Coffee, and the UGA bookstore. Now here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Good evening, Dog Nation. Welcome into our DawgNation Postgame show once again here for the 2024 season, live at the UGA bookstore. That's where I am. So if you're leaving Sanford Stadium, we'd love to have you come by and say hello to us. If you want to be on the show, our guy Smith here is going to help get you on. We'll get your thoughts about what just happened for Georgia in a win against Tennessee Tech. And if you want to join us via phones, or like we say it phones, what we really mean is the Zoom, the link there. You can click that, whichever comment section you're watching in on Facebook, on YouTube, at DawgNation.com. There'll be a link for you to click. You can join the show that way. We will give you our thoughts. You can give us your thoughts as Georgia comes out and gets a 48-3 win over Tennessee Tech here right now. But I've got to imagine the voice that you also would love hearing on our DawgNation postgame show this year, Davin Bellamy. He's going to have a lot to say there as well. Now, Davin, we've got so much to talk about here, but I know as a defensive guy, to have sort of a cheap field goal added at the end of the game, we just saw it, 30 whatever yards here, to get Tennessee Tech on the board after it had been a shutout all day long. As a defensive guy, I know how much you must hate the idea of Tennessee Tech trying that field goal late there and trying to find some points and ruining the shutout for Georgia. I got to imagine you're thinking about that here today.
Most definitely, man. I think as a defensive player, it's been times in my career where, you're this close to leaving a goose egg up there. And, when you're in college and you're playing, these type teams and, everyone has talent, for you to leave a goose egg up there really speaks a lot about your defense. So I've been in a lot of games where the backups come in at the end and, they let up a drive and it ends in 3. And it's crazy because my senior year, the backups that we were letting in that were ruining our goose egg attempts end up being those guys that won the national championship and having those great defenses. But whenever you're this close to a goose egg, man, it's just something that you will never forget.
I want to talk to you more about that defense and that particular thing you just mentioned, because I have some memories of your Georgia career where stuff like that did kind of pop up. Kind of fun to look back on that. We'll do that over the course of our time here today. We'll also get into as a very big day for Carson Beck here in a moment too. But Davin, let me also start by saying that I think one of the things that Georgia fans are going to be watching closely here, and we'll give you some of Kirby Smart coming up a little bit later on. We'll give you some sights and sounds from the victorious Georgia locker room as we get that. Jeff Sentell, Kaylee, Mansell, they'll contribute to our DawgNation postgame coverage as it relates to all of that. And Davin, the one thing a lot of Georgia fans are going to be listening to very closely here, and we're going to try to give you as many updates as we can before our show is done. We see Oscar Delp leave this game, near the end of the second quarter. It's confirmed in the third quarter that he does have an ankle injury. Was back on the sideline. He was wearing, the sneakers style shoes. So, we got visual representation of him once again, but obviously not in this game. We also saw Nate Frazier kind of leave, perhaps precautionary, with a little bit of a shoulder situation. So when you play a game like this against Tennessee Tech, where essentially the outcome is already known before the game even takes place, the one thing all Georgia fans are looking for is, okay, how healthy does this team leave the game? And at least as it relates to Oscar Delp and to Nate Frazier, we'll be watching closely to see what kind of injury update we get on them and how, serious or not those two particular injury situations were, correct?
Right. No doubt. And like I said, on the pregame show, in order to make the run that every team, wants to make, that has the talent, to make that run, it needs a little bit of luck, hard work. And a part of luck is, staying healthy, but it's only week 2. And even though you don't want to exhaust your starters on a team like, Tennessee State, it's only week 2. So you have to continue to get that machine, your team moving like a, well-oiled machine. So guys have to play. And, injuries are just a part of football. And that's going to happen with every squad. So it's going to take our younger guys and our depth, kind of which I've been speaking on for, a long period of time, that, depth wins you game, especially with the elongated season and with the tough schedule. that we have. A lot of guys are going to have to, step up because injuries are just going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's well said. So if you're watching, you can click the link and be a part of the show. If you're here live, you can be a part of the show there as well. Our guy Smith's right here. He'll help you get on. We have our first guest coming up. One of the friends of our DawgNation crews, our buddy Tony here. Tony, you got Davin Bellamy there on the other side. You can't hear him, but he can hear you. Tell us what you thought about today's Georgia game.
Oh, I thought it was a great overall effort. Defense was awesome. I hate that we had to give up that last, field goal there.
We were just talking about that a moment ago, giving up that field goal at the end.
But except for a couple of plays where they kind of gave up, some long yardage, I thought our defense played awesome, and the offense was great. We got both guys in there, both our quarterbacks. So overall, I was very happy with it.
Tony, I think that's well said. Thanks for stopping by, be a part of the show here today. Go Dogs indeed. DawgNation Postgame show rolling on here. So, Davin, let me give your thoughts on both those things here. We'll do more of the defense in a moment, but how about the really record-setting day for Carson Beck, where he ties a school record with 5 touchdown passes. Those goes to 5 different receivers. I think there was a lot to like. Now, I get the opponent here, but we also, wanted to see Georgia get off to a faster start offensively. Today, Georgia clearly did that. What did you make of the big day through the air from Georgia quarterback Carson Beck here today?
Brandon, man, I'm very high, on Carson Beck. As far as being one of those guys who you kind of don't see a lot of, as in being around, a program for a long period of time, waiting your time. And I kind of have a connect, with him because I kind of went through the same thing and, not transferring and, waiting your time. But, kind of like I said last week, this guy is very efficient. Like I said, he's seen it all. He just looks very poised. Throughout the game, he makes all the right decisions, and he spreads the love. Every QB knows that if I can get multiple guys involved and get their confidence high, that'll carry us, throughout the season. And with it only being week 2, usually the defenses start off a little more hot and in sync faster than the offenses. The offenses with routes and stuff, you got to get that game reps and the pat and go going. And I just think, even though it's a lesser opponent, just seeing him drive the ball downfield, make those passes, just checking it down, not forcing it downfield. The only thing I must say, just about the performers was, his medium, passing game is right where you needed to be. But if we're going to take that next step as an offense, I think we got to do a better job of stretching the defense and taking the top of, off the defense. And we did that, a little bit more, in the second half. But he's just a veteran guy, who's seen it all. He sat back, he's practiced against great defenses for, 4 or 5 years. So the game is really slow for him right now, and you can definitely tell.
I think that's a really interesting point. And as you said, so in the second half, there is the long connection to Arian Smith for a touchdown, but at least one moment I can remember from the first half where you sort of thought that connection might happen and it didn't quite. And if you want to go back to like when Mike Bobo spoke before the start of the season, the Georgia offensive coordinator, he did mention maybe a little bit better accuracy, better connection on some of those deep throws being something that Carson Beck, could work on here this year. We remember a year ago a couple of times where it seemed like just a matter of inches, right? Just a step or two away from connecting on even more deep throws last season. So, what is that, Davin? Is that a practice timing thing? Is that just stepping into what is the difference between those couple of inches that do turn those almost completions into actual completions and the sort of explosive plays that can provide?
You know what? I think that just comes from sometimes trying to be, too perfect. I've been around a lot of, quarterbacks at the professional level and, at the college level. And when it comes to those deep balls, it's all about, throwing it into a breadbasket, and you're not really trying to aim the football. So when you try to really just put it on them, sometimes you can underthrow them, or, throw it too deep. And honestly, he's playing with a great defense. So in his mind, he understands that he doesn't have to win the game by himself. As long as he doesn't turn over the ball and make, mistakes, put in the defense in bad situations, he pretty much knows that, they're going to win. So he doesn't take a lot of those risks that we would like to see. And when you're throwing the ball down deep, in the game, it's a rep. It's a game rep. And if you're only doing that 2-3 times a game, you're not really getting the feel for it. That's why, in my opinion, even though he's a very efficient QB, in order for us to take that next step when we really get into playing the Texases and these great defenses, you're going to have to throw it over the top, just to let them know that's a part of your offense.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I think a lot of Georgia fans agree with that too, Davin. And, on the flip side of that, I think one of the things that you also really like about Carson today is the fact that on a team this year that doesn't have the obvious sort of easy button offensively like Brock Bowers,
right.
I think one of the ways we'll judge this offense this year is how well is Beck getting multiple guys involved in this. I mentioned 5 touchdowns to 5 different guys. I think 8 different pass catchers caught the ball in the first half here. So I think the one thing where Beck's experience really does show up is the fact that he is finding a way to read a defense and really spread the ball around. Georgia's got a lot of depth, and Beck, in terms of how he distributes the football, certainly seems to be taking advantage of the sheer number of guys that Georgia has that can catch passes.
No doubt. We mostly, when we line up, on the football field, we're going to be the more, talented team, just by personnel. So you got a lot of playmakers on the offense, and those guys also understand to always stay ready because, I may not have gotten the ball in the first quarter, but it may be coming to me. And when you have so many weapons, it's all about who has the mismatch. So I think being an older quarterback like Beck, he understands that, confidence is everything, to a wide receiver, and also targets and touches. So I got to spread the love, especially if you don't have that one guy that you just know you can go to on a big third down. You kind of want the confidence of all your wide receivers to be there. And him being a senior quarterback, he understands that, and he's deliberately going out and looking for guys trying to get everyone involved, because some receivers, if they don't see the ball in the first drive or the first 2 quarters, they check out. Well, it's the quarterback's job to feel the temperature of his weapons. And, okay, has this guy checked out? Has this guy checked out? I need to feed this guy. I'm feeding this guy too much. So I just think him just having that seniority and understand how to be the captain of the ship, knowing I got to get all these guys in. May need these guys week 7, week 8, week 9, especially when you start playing these harder teams. And that's just where his maturity shows.
I want to get you and some thoughts on the defensive side here, because we've already had folks here live at the UGA bookstore mention that today, even before our show began. A lot of praise for this Georgia defense. Now, we can joke about Tennessee Tech tacking on points at the end to ruin the shutout opportunity, but this ends up being another day in which Georgia, doesn't allow a touchdown. And, you can certainly chalk this up to, okay, well, you're only playing Tennessee Tech, but it was the same thing last week against Clemson. And
right.
For me, Davin, I feel like I see the building blocks here for a defense that can remind people a little bit of what Georgia was doing in that national championship era of 2021 and 2022. That's an incredibly high standard, and will this team play that well over the course of a full season? Of course, that remains to be seen. But I think that you are seeing a level of saltiness here, a level of, kind of potential nastiness here, and just sheer athletic ability here, where I think the sky could be the limit for this Georgia defense. Would you agree with me that pound for pound, the kind of, I guess, the relentless way in which Georgia's played defensively, it may be the biggest story of the first 2 games of the season here thus far?
You know what? Honestly, to be completely honest with you, Brandon, I have to see more. It's only week 2, and that defense,
okay.
That was one of those national championships, man. Those defense ranked with every, historically great defense to play college football. It's only week 2, and the standard that we have is you have to stop the run. When it comes to us stopping the run and just playing defense, everything starts with our front 7. The front 7 was good, but before I got there, it was good when I was there, and it's good now. And that's just the staple on what we build our team off of. So they did have -5 yards rushing at halftime, which is a crazy stat. I just think it's a little bit too early. I have to see them against more just competition. Even though Clemson was a really good opponent. You know, Clemson offense has been clicking, you know, in the last 2-3 years. So it's kind of hard to judge against the Clemson. I haven't really been able to see the pass rush really just open up yet. And I think a lot of the things we're doing is we're being very vanilla. The first, even with Clemson and this week, we're not showing a lot. And just knowing Coach Smart, those exotic third down, you know, packages, we're not showing those yet because honestly, we don't need to. We're just lining up and we've out physical everyone we played. And even though Clemson has the name, they just can't compete with us when it comes to a physical style type of football. And we eventually just wore them down. So I just have to see more, you know, more of a body of work. But what we're doing right now is on pace to what I'm used to seeing a Georgia defense do. Now, when we start getting into this big time football, that's kind of more of a way to judge it. But through week 1 and week 2, I don't have any complaints. I'm just kind of hard to please when it comes on the defensive side of the ball.
And that's why I love having you on the show, Davin, because obviously you know what great defense looks like, having played that here at the University of Georgia. We got more Georgia fans on the scene here. Stepping over, you can be a part of the show. We got Davin Bellamy here on the other side. He can hear you. So, first of all, tell us your name and then tell us your thoughts about the game here today.
Sure. Daniel Hancock. We're actually from Ocean Springs, Mississippi.
Is that right? Well, welcome into you get a chance to come to a lot of games?
No, I don't. I'm in the Navy, so I don't get home a lot. I'm from Augusta.
Well, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you for your service.
And I got
Thank
my
you for your
son
service.
back. It's his first game ever between the hedges. So.
Oh, that's incredible. So your first game here today, did you have a good time? Yes. That's great to hear. And Davin said thank you for your service there, too.
Absolutely.
So tell us what you thought about Georgia here today.
Hey, you know, I think Tennessee Tech, it is what it is, you know, and I thought we saw a lot of good things from the defense. You're going to get what you get from the offense. Ready to move on to some stronger games, and I feel pretty good about the year. I think the defense, we're seeing a little bit of that 2021 coming back, so I feel good about Carson Beck coming into the home stretch here.
And then you got on the road in the SEC for the first game next Saturday against Kentucky. Sounds like you're about ready for some real competition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you for being a part of the show. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend here in Athens. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
How about this? Is this for me?
It is. I'm a captain of a Navy ship.
Unbelievable.
Oh, man, that's cool. Man, that's
How about
cool.
the commander's coin here from this ship? What an amazing thing. I'll cherish this forever.
That's
Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you very much. It is cool, Davin. I tell you, and I know you've been with us now for a little bit of time here, but it's amazing how kind and generous Georgia fans are. I know you experienced that during your Georgia career. I'm always blown away by how nice people are and the way in which they, you know, show love to Georgia fans to each other. Obviously, to those of us who are lucky enough to be a part of it here at DawgNation, and you as a former player, I know you experienced that a lot during your career. It's just truly such an amazing thing to be able to see.
It is, man, and I kind of see it more. I kind of see it more now that I'm, starting to venture into things, really outside of football. And, Georgia take care of their own. We got the best fans. So even while I was there, I love them even now, man. They're really, helping me get to where I need to get to.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that, and that's good stuff. And I do want to go back to what you were also talking about a moment ago there, too, about, okay, so, rushing yards and pass rush, the two things you're looking for from defense. And today, Tennessee Tech does finish in excess of 100 yards rushing, which does remind you a little bit of a couple of the issues where Georgia had some concerns last year. Last year, Georgia kind of very in uncustomary fashion gave up more rushing yards than we're used to. So perhaps a little bit of that today. I'm sure Kirby Smart, who kind of always finds something to sort of point out to improve upon, maybe we'll hear him mention that today there as well. This idea that we don't ever want to give up rushing yards to anybody, no matter who we're playing, including Tennessee Tech here today.
No doubt. Tennessee Tech has some hidden, rushing yards in there, with the quarterback scrambles. And so I feel like we held the running game in check just for those, couple scrambles that really just jumped the yards per carry up. But the number one rule in the SEC, if you want to win, is you have to stop the run. And me being a pass rusher who loved the pass rush, in order to pass rush, you got to get them in pass rush situations, which means stopping the run on first and second down. So that's going to be harped on forever here in Georgia. And that's really what we all want to see. 100 yards to Tennessee State, honestly is too much, even though some of those rushing yards are miscued for, quarterback scrambles. just us being so much more, physical than Tennessee State and just having better players and the standard that we have there. 100 yards is way too much, but I'm pretty sure they'll pick that up. They'll fix that. I know Coach Smart doesn't care about the win. He's harping on that because I know when I was there, we didn't even like giving up 100 yards to a team that was averaging 160, 180. So to give up 100 yards rushing against, Tennessee State is something you raise eyebrows about, but not really too much alarming because at the end of the day, it's 45-3 and end of the game, and you got the hidden scrambles in there. But as far as Georgia trying to chase that perfection, 100 yards is way too much to give up to a Tennessee State.
All right, if you're on hold, we're going to get your calls here in just a moment. Let me get one more thought, Davin, before we say goodbye to you here today. We always love your insight here as a part of our DawgNation Postgame show. You also mentioned the pass rush. And, next week, Georgia goes to Kentucky. It begins SEC play. And that's where we're going to really learn the most about the Georgia defense and Georgia overall. Whether it be eventually Mikael Williams coming back to full health or a guy like Damon Wilson or more creative ways of using a guy like Jalen Walker or Gabe Harris. You can go through the entire list of names of who it might be. Do you think that this is going to be that season where you really do see a lot of those guys unleashed and that we do see Georgia really kind of get back to getting after the quarterback the way that a pass rusher like yourself loves to see Georgia do, and the way that when you think about the best of Georgia, bringing quarterbacks to the ground has obviously been a part of that. Like, how much of that pass rush do you think we have a chance to see unleashed here in future weeks?
I think we got a great chance of seeing it. Mikael is the number 2 overall prospect on the board, and he's a pass rusher. And I definitely think if he's just on the edge going, he can do what you expect him to do. When I was watching the Clemson game, he was lined up, between the guard, and the center. As Georgia gets exotic sometimes on their, third down packages. But I want to see him, on the edge. When you got a guy like 13, and really with the defensive line that we have, Walker, on the other side, you don't really have to trick the offensive line. Just line up and beat them. And as you know, the best years at Georgia are when we win on national championships. It's when you're getting the quarterback on the ground with the Aziz of the world, and Nolan Smith. That's very important because when you get into the college football playoffs or these tight games, TFLs and sacks are what puts the offense, behind the sticks, and it gets them in those third and longs. Then you bring your closer in to get off the field. So kind of like, Brandon, our best years were when we were getting the quarterback on the ground. So even though the defense is stopping the run, and I like what I'm seeing the first 2 weeks, let's see them go on the road. Let's see when it's 3rd and 8 and we really got to get off the field. That's when you can kind of test the strength and the heart, of the pass rush and of the defense. But I love what I'm seeing, but the first 2 weeks are just too hard to see. And, next week will be our real first test.
Davin, well said. Great stuff. We love having you part of our DawgNation Postgame show. It's fun to see you on the pregame this morning there as well. And obviously coming up this week with a look ahead to Kentucky there on DawgNation Daily. Appreciate your insight. Appreciate your time. And we'll look forward to talking to you after what we think is a much more interesting game next Saturday after Kentucky. It'll be a late one, but we'll look forward to your thoughts, your opinions there on all that. Thanks for being here as a part of our DawgNation Postgame show here today.
No doubt, man. Appreciate you, Brandon. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed. Good stuff from Davin Bellamy right there. It's our DawgNation Postgame show. We're live here at the UGA bookstore. And by the way, we got Georgia fans all over the place watching the show, hanging out, and knowing this is the place to shop for all that good-looking UGA apparel at the end of the show, at the end of the game there as well, too. Getting ready for the big season. Right down there on the first floor, you want the Vineyard Vines, the Tommy Bahama, the Peter Millar, the 47 brand, the Nike Coaches gear, all the stuff that everybody's wearing to look good on game day around Georgia football. You get all of that right here from the UGA bookstore. So please make sure you come check that out. Do your shopping. Get ready for game day right here at the UGA bookstore. And don't forget, big autograph signings also throughout the year there as well. In fact, today before the game, you had Buck Bellew, the national champion quarterback. You had Muhammad Massaquoi. He was on hand there too. So all kinds of good Georgia fans hanging out, having a good time. You get all of that right here at the UGA bookstore. So if you're on hold, we'll get ready to take your calls, reacting to a Georgia 48-3 win over Tennessee Tech. We'll try to get some word from the UGA locker room on the injury situation involving Oscar Delp. We saw a little bit of a shoulder thing for Nate Frazier. Hopefully that was not anything to be too concerned about. You also saw some video a moment ago that our Cody Chaffins had before the game. Mikael Williams not going through the dog walk. He was in the boot, kind of as expected, obviously dealing with that. So a little bit of an injury situation. We'll try to get cleared up on some of that and see where a lot of that stands as it relates to Georgia. So we'll get ready to dive in here and get your phone calls and find out what's on your mind here today. We'll also let you know this is that in a little bit we're going to try to catch up with Jeff Sentell. A little bit of an update, UGA recruiting. Big target for Georgia visited elsewhere today. We'll tell you more about that here coming up. Randy and Buford, you're next up on our DawgNation Postgame show. Randy, glad to have you here. How about them Dogs? What'd you think about a 48-3 win for Georgia here today?
Okay, BA, can you see me?
Hey, Randy. It's our buddy Randy Hall here. Randy, how are you?
Yeah, very much. I can't
can see you. Go ahead.
But I can hear you.
Randy, glad to have you here. All right, Randy, turn your sound down if you don't mind for us. That way we won't hear the echo. All right, so we lost Randy there. So, Randy, hate that for you, but we're always glad to have you on the show. And if you want to click the link, be a part of the show, we're glad to have you on that there, too. We'll take your comments. We'll react to everything today for the 48-3 win for Georgia over Tennessee Tech. Let me also run through a couple of notes here as well. First of all, Janelle Aguero, speaking of the injury concern, obviously, Aguero was held out last week against Clemson, but Aguero does get the start today, so back on the field here for UGA. That could be important as the season goes along, and obviously on a long-term story of a guy trying to come back from injury. Obviously, Branson Robinson finding the end zone with a touchdown. In many ways, that may end up being one of the sort of the feel-good moments of today, the fact that Robinson, who's been on such a long journey here, and obviously, going through so much to kind of come back from an injury that kept him out of the entirety of the 2023 season. The fact that Robinson was able to get back and do that here today, you certainly love to see that. Very good news on that front as he gets in, he gets a touchdown, and a lot to like if you're a Georgia fan about Branson Robinson coming back from injury there. So plenty more comments, plenty more reaction. Our next caller up here is Ryan Walker. Always love when Ryan joins us in the show. Ryan, welcome into our DawgNation postgame show. We're live at the UGA bookstore. You're reacting to a big win for Georgia. How'd you feel about 48-3 here today?
Well, I'm a little sad that I didn't get to talk to you last week or whatnot, but I'm here today, so definitely loving it. But I'll say this, as Davin said earlier, Carson's got to get a little bit better with the deep ball accuracy. Definitely was great. 5 touchdowns today. Was able to show his mobility. A lot of people said he couldn't move, did his thing. I'm not going to be a wet blanket, but I'm with Davin on this one. You have to be better on defense. We shut them out, didn't give up a touchdown, but there were a lot of missed tackles. At University of Georgia on a Kirby Smart defense, you don't miss tackles. And they had great rushing yards today against us, which shouldn't have been today. I'll say I got to give I don't know the kid's name. He came in at the second half after everybody was stopped. It's a young safety that was coming up just smacking folks at the end of the game. That right there shows the depth that we have at Georgia because the kid was nice and run support, was able to be in position at the time. I like where our linebacker core is right now, young, getting the experience. Next week is going to be a real test for us on the road at Kentucky, and I think we're going to do well when it comes to being able to keep their offense stifled. Got to give a shout-out to Charlie Warner. Tomorrow he's going to get his chance to play for the Atlanta Falcons. Got to give those dogs a shout out. That's going to be there. And Javon Bullard looked amazing last night. 11 solo tackles. So definitely can't wait till next week. Not much to decipher in this ball game. Just got to get a little bit better, tighten up. But I think we can beat Texas, and I think we can also beat Alabama. Neither one of those teams impressed me, Brandon.
Ryan, I think that's a very interesting point. I always appreciate your opinion on the show here today. And one of the things he's reacting to, and thanks so much for the call, Ryan, obviously what goes down a little earlier today, Texas does go on the road. They beat Michigan, probably the marquee performance of the weekend, and obviously something that is going to create even more hype around the game for Georgia against Texas coming up in October. But in the case of Ryan Walker right there saying, listen, even with that, I don't necessarily feel like that ruins Georgia's chances of getting that win. So Ryan's still feeling okay about Georgia in that spot, but pretty clearly the Georgia-Texas game now made bigger because of the win today against Michigan, really sort of sending the signal that this is a very different kind of Texas team than the one that was mocked a lot in the really for most of the last 15 years or so, kind of playing in the Big 12 and never quite living up to the hype. As of now, anyway, this is a Texas team that certainly indicates they want to be a different type of team than that, and also a little love for former dogs now in the NFL, including Javon Bullard last night in Brazil. I did not see the game, but I did see the one highlight of Bullard, though, when he just threw off that one would-be blocker. Kind of a nice thing to hear. We talked about Carson Beck a little earlier. 5 touchdown passes for Beck on the day. How did Carson feel about the game for himself and his teammates? Let's give you a chance to hear a little bit of Carson Beck from a couple of minutes ago reacting to the game that was. Here's the Georgia quarterback from the Georgia locker room.
Defense, we knew how they were going to play against us, and we attacked what we thought were their weaknesses. But no, I thought our wide receivers had a really good day. We have so many athletes on the field, and they went out there and made plays. I mean, there's a few guys wide open out there that makes my job really easy. So I thought we had a really good day as offense. How important is a game like this for you to be able just to build chemistry with your receivers and your tailbacks? Yeah, I mean, every game we play is important, and I'll continue to stress this and say this. It's never about the opponent, whether it's Team A, B, or C. It's always about us and us playing to our standard. And obviously, I'm on the offensive side of the ball. So how can the offense play to our standard every single week in, week out, whether that's practice, game? I thought we did well. I think there's some things that we can go back, watch film, and fix. But no, I thought we had a good game. And what about Trevor Etienne's debut for you guys? Obviously, the leading rusher for you, and just to see him back after a suspension. Yeah, no, thought he had a great day. He's very capable back. A lot of talent there. Excited to see, as the offense progresses and as he progresses into our system, what he's able to do. As far as depth is concerned with the receivers, is this maybe one of the deepest ones you've seen since you've been here? Yeah, I'd say so. As far as I look out there, I'm not really worried about who's out there. It could be a two, quote unquote. I don't know if there's really ones and twos and ones. I think there's a lot of guys that are capable out there that can go out there and make our offense explosive. Carson, last week you guys were kind of criticized because of the slow start to the first half.
With the interview there with Carson Beck, you can go to the DawgNation YouTube page and see all of that for yourself right there on the DawgNation YouTube page, the full kind of post-game interview with Carson Beck, as well as all Georgia players and Georgia coach Kirby Smart post-game reaction throughout the evening into tomorrow. And, of course, a lot of folks on Sunday love getting all that. You'll get that there at the DawgNation YouTube page. And to kind of bolster the point you just heard Carson Beck making about the sheer number of receivers that he was able to get involved today that are capable of playing here for Georgia here this season and really playing a high level of football. We can show you some of that on the screen just to give you an idea of how many of those guys that Carson Beck was able to get involved here today. You see Arian Smith, 4 catches, 73 yards a touchdown. Dylan Bell, 4 catches, 61 yards a touchdown. Dominic Lovett, 3 catches, 33 yards a touchdown. Lawson Lucky also getting involved there as well. Had a big catch last week. He gets a touchdown here today. And then Scovie White getting involved late in the game there too. You love to see that. And obviously, when Carson Beck plays as well as he does today, a chance for some extended work for Gunnar Stockton. I think the sense that we had, based on kind of the rumor mill from fall camp, was that Stockton, I think, pretty clearly won that backup quarterback job. I think he was a solid number 2 coming into today. And obviously what we've seen, whether it be Carson Beck in this role before or others, is that if you can gain the spot of primary backup, and if you can be the first quarterback that comes in once Georgia has a big enough lead where that opportunity exists, then you also create for the opportunity for yourself to perhaps be a future Georgia starting quarterback there as well. And so on the basis of the somewhat extended work that Stockton got today, if you're doing an early handicap on who has a chance to be Georgia's 2025 starting quarterback, obviously the experience that Stockton is getting here right now certainly gives him a little bit of a leg up. Now, Clearly, Jaden Rashada, who's I know a little bit banged up right now, he'll still be heard from. Ryan Puglisi, obviously, he'll be heard from in this too, just because of the sheer arm talent that he has. But one of the things that fans are always leaning in more closely on in a game like this is that chance to see how some of the young players perform, particularly when it comes to backup quarterback. Oftentimes, the chance you get to see that guy the most is in a game like this. And so today, you got some of that from Gunnar Stockton. All right, here's what we still have for you. As I told you before, there's a pretty significant recruiting update that I believe the Georgia fans need to know. Jeff Sentell, we're going to get more information from him about that. Injury stuff as it relates to Oscar Delp and Nate Frazier, some of the guys who left the game today. We're going to try to get that from Georgia coach Kirby Smart. The feeling around the Tennessee Tech program as they took it on the chin pretty hard. Kaylee Mansell will give us more on that. So we got a lot of voices you'll still hear from before all said and done. But first, we want to pause here for quick 60-second update to thank a couple of the folks who make this show possible for you today. And then 60 seconds after that, we're right back to your calls, right back to your comments. Plenty more insight on a Georgia 48-3 win over Tennessee Tech here today. So 60-second break, and then we're right back after that.
Let Cercheros make it happen. It's friendly Tex-Mex, served fresh every day. Cercheros Catering can handle the crowd, so it's perfect for your tailgate or watch party. Order online, pickup, or delivery. Cercheros is Georgia grown with over 30 locations throughout the state, bringing you fresh Mex, bowls, burritos, tacos, and more, with over 25 fresh toppings, customizable, just the way you like it. So find a location near you at Cercheros.com. That's Cercheros.com.
When you've got to haul, when you've got to mow, when you've got to feed, whatever you've got to do, whatever you've got to do, you've got to get a John Deere. Whether you're working at home or on the farm, the team at Lassiter Tractor Company can help you find the right product for you. Find your local dealer at LassiterEQ.com.
DawgNation Postgame is sponsored by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, and the UGA Bookstore.
Welcome back to our DawgNation Postgame show. We're live here at the UGA Bookstore. Georgia gets a win, 48-3 over Tennessee Tech. If you're just joining us, let's take a moment to reset a couple of the key storylines from today's game. We had a chance to talk to Davin Bellamy a little earlier. Davin, the former defensive guy, as you would imagine, not happy at all. But the fact that Tennessee Tech sort of tacks on the cheap field goal late to break what would have been a Georgia shutout. But also it sort of started what has been a little bit of an interesting conversation about the Georgia defense here today. We've had callers on the show kind of say that, like to have seen maybe a little bit more, from Georgia in terms of giving up more than 100 yards rushing. Maybe Kirby Smart will talk more about that himself. I mean, for me, ultimately, I can't make too big of a deal about that. I mean, I think to have, because remember, keep this in mind, there are only 2 games all last year that Georgia played defensively touchdown free. Those are the 2 games you would have expected, Ball State and UT Martin. The fact that through 2 games so far, Georgia is still yet to give up a touchdown, I take that as a pretty big positive. And obviously there are much larger tests coming than the one that Georgia faced today. And frankly, even the one that Georgia faced last week against a top 15 ranked Clemson team. But nonetheless, I believe this has been, through 2 games, a little bit of a return to form for the Georgia defense, although maybe, as Davin intimated, there was a couple of sort of cheapish type rushing yards that Tennessee Tech was able to find today. I still thought overall this is a pretty good day for the Georgia defense. It was nice, for instance, to see KJ Bolden get in there. He got a sack in the early going here of this game. I think you really like that. The fact that Georgia was even positioned for another shutout, I think once again speaks to maybe this is just going to be a Georgia group here this year that gets back to sort of its stingy ways defensively. I think that could be a pretty good thing. And if I had to sort of sum up the overall biggest headline here today, for me, it was the thing we sort of called for last week and have been looking for a lot this year. Didn't quite get it last week and certainly didn't get that a lot in 2023, but Georgia gets off to a much faster start in this game today. First offensive play from scrimmage resulted in a touchdown. Shortly after that, Georgia's scoring again. It was Dylan Bell who got the first one. It was Colby Young, as open as anybody will ever be, getting the second one there for Georgia. And just like that, Georgia had those 14 first quarter points, which somebody joked with me online, I was sort of looking for from Georgia last week. You got that here this week. Either way, even against the Ball States and the UT Martins of the world, Georgia not exactly getting off to great starts offensively in those games last season, but today much better as far as that's concerned. And what sets up the first Georgia touchdown there, the long, 40-plus yard kick return, punt return for Anthony Evans. I get the impression that Evans, and I know Georgia had Mekhi Muse last year in that spot at times, and he was doing some nice things. I get the impression that Anthony Evans may be able to give Georgia a little bit of a boost in the kicking game, a little bit of a spark when it comes to the punt return game, the likes of which the Georgia hasn't had as much during the Kirby Smart era. If you really watch college football on a regular basis, it almost seems like the punt return game is just less a part of this level of football than it once was. Teams are just getting better on kick coverage. I think some teams are probably copying Georgia and using better players in kick coverage situations, not trying to give up those easy yards. Last year, Georgia did not get – I'm right about this, right? Georgia didn't give up a single punt return yard all last season. That's become a little bit more of a norm in terms of – you just don't see the exciting, electrifying, Rocket Ishmael style punt return anymore. But Evans might be able to get Georgia some extra yards on that, set Georgia up perhaps at the right time for a shorter field. And maybe what you saw from Evans could be one of those things that perhaps also continues its way in to the games that are going to matter most for Georgia here this year. So, as I told you before, one of the guys I hope we are able to catch up with before we're done today is our Jeff Sentell. Jeff obviously watching close to all the recruiting news that kind of bubbles up during this game for UGA. I believe we did confirm that Ousmane Kromah was in the stands today, that he did visit for Georgia. I believe that Christian Gass, the current commit to Tennessee, the linebacker who chose Tennessee over Georgia a few weeks ago, he takes a visit to UGA. But there is also reporting coming out of Tuscaloosa, and this will be of note for Georgia fans, that one of the biggest targets on the board for Georgia, the 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry, obviously the former Georgia commit, flips to USC, then decommits from USC, as big a priority as there is. I think there are published reports out there that Terry did visit Alabama today for Alabama's game against South Florida. What does that mean? Perhaps nothing. Obviously, Georgia remains confident in the recruitment of Terry, but exactly where all of this is going and heading, clearly Jeff Sentell hopefully can give us some insight in that before we're done here today. And one of those recruiting names we're going to be watching really closely. We'll also try to get you a chance to hear from Kirby Smart here too. And as promised, hopefully a little bit of an update on kind of where things stand with Oscar Delp. We saw Nate Frazier a little bit banged up and other injury concerns that Georgia might have. So, speaking of that, over on the YouTube side of things, Edward Branscombe mentioning that there's really no reason to put anybody back in the game, just given the nature of the opponent, and that is certainly the case, and that's why Georgia fans certainly hope for the best as it relates to all of that. Sometimes it's a little sort of difficult to tell in a situation of, was this opponent-driven? Was this more about a concern? Because obviously, as Georgia gets ready to move into SEC play, long stretch of games away from Athens there as well, as they get ready for all of that, obviously, as healthy as you possibly can be, going to be a really important thing on that front. So if you're watching on any of the comment sections, click the link. You can be a part of the show. We'd love to have you there for that. I'll also take a moment here to read a couple of comments there, too. Dan Mann mentioning Georgia Tech here today. So pour one out, if you will, for Georgia Tech. And it's, I guess, short period of semi-relevance around college football. Got a chance to be ranked in the top 25, feeling good after beating Florida State. Come to find out, Florida State's not very good, so therefore the Tech win probably doesn't mean very much. Last week, got a win against Georgia State. Nobody really cares about that. But today, playing as a big, bad top 25 team, going up to the Carrier Dome there in New York, getting a chance to take on Syracuse. If you missed it, I'm sad to report, sarcastically I say, Georgia Tech lost. Fran Brown, the former Georgia assistant, now head coach at Syracuse, delivered a win for Syracuse against Georgia Tech. So kind of a return to glory upended before it really got going. If y'all seen the Dr. Pepper Fansville commercial about the hype train and having to get off the hype train, I feel like a lot of folks there in Atlanta may be hopping off the hype train after Georgia Tech goes on the road as a relatively, field goal favorite or so against Syracuse, but walks away not able to get that victory. Let's get a couple of the comments here there as well. Carter Lawson mentioning Brock Vandegrift having some issues in the game against South Carolina. You know, one of the names that we talked about a couple of times on DawgNation Daily this week, and we'll give you an update on scores from around college football coming up, including the SEC before we're done here. But one of the names we talked about a couple of times is Dylan Stewart for South Carolina. Now, listen, week one, much closer game than it was supposed to be against Old Dominion. South Carolina did not look very good. But we said about that game, one of the guys who did look very good that day was the freshman pass rusher, Dylan Stewart. And based on what I've been seeing on social media, including our comment sections here right now, it has been quite impressive for Stewart today, kind of getting after Brock Vandegrift in Kentucky. So that is a game worth watching. Obviously, it's the first SEC game of the year. It is also a preview of the Georgia opponent for next week on the road. And it sounds like Brock Vandegrift in his first start against an SEC foe, sounds like Vandegrift has had a couple of issues there thus far. We'll give you more on that game here coming up. So let's also now, here's part of our DawgNation postgame show, as we promised, hearing a little bit from Kirby Smart, what he thought about the game, hopefully a little injury update here too. Let's get that from Kirby Smart here right now as a part of our DawgNation postgame show. Here's Kirby Smart.
Proud of our guys today. Came out with good energy, good passion to be able to play at home in front of our crowd, which you don't get many chances. You know, I think we average 6 maybe home games a year, and that was one of them. So we took advantage of it. Guys played hard. I thought we had ebbs and flows that were really good, and then some that weren't. And I was really proud of the guys. I challenged them at halftime. You know, we had lost a couple third downs on defense. We had lost 2 minutes. And we had lost some red zone and been stopped. So I thought that they came out in the half, and the first drive was really important to me. I thought the offensive line handled that. They overpowered a group they should overpower. And we were able to play a lot of players today. We subbed out probably earlier than anybody in the country, and I think that helps us down the road. We played a lot of players today, played a lot of players last week, we play a lot of players every year, and I think that helps grow our team and our depth. So thanks to our crowd for sticking it out, and it was warm like I anticipated, and I think that affected both teams.
No question? Kirby, what have you seen out of Colby Young? 2 games, 2 touchdowns. Just talk about his growth and development.
Yeah, he continues to get better. I don't know that today's a good judgment of Colby Young. You know, he had a mesh pattern that they didn't cover. You know, it wasn't a wow play. It was just an error on their part and a pretty easy throw. So the one last week was impressive. He continues to grow and get better, and we're going to need him in our offense. We need him to be able to play even more snaps and be in the best shape of his life to play those snaps.
To follow up on Kirby, or follow up on Colby, how much, when you were looking for a transfer portal addition this offseason, did you look for that kind of specific big red zone kind of body type?
Yeah, didn't really say we were looking for that. We just looking for guys that fit our culture. You know, it wasn't like it was this is the cookie cutter. We want big, we want good, and we want good people for our culture, and he is that. He was very clear in his reasoning for why he wanted to come, and I think he fits what our culture is, and it was more fit than it was just looking for a specific type.
Coach, the stark difference between this first half of this game and last week against Clemson. Talk to me about what you saw, the connections between the offense out there today.
Yeah, we played a different team. That was the difference. I mean, I would love to sit here and tell you that we just started fast today and everything clicked, but that wasn't the same opponent. And we were considerably better than that opponent, and we should execute at a high level. And the week before, there was a lot of problems out there in terms of their players blocking them. And when you can run the ball, you can do pretty much what you want offensively. And you know, the success we had running it opened it up for play actions and some shots.
Kirby, what difference does Trevor make to the run game, adding into the guys you already have that you feel good about as well?
I don't think we know that yet. It's hard to tell today, right? Like, I wouldn't judge that on today. I mean, I think we've got really good stable of backs. I'm fired up about our backs. I've said repeatedly to you guys that we got a great group, good young, good old, good leadership, good depth. I felt really comfortable there all year. I still feel that way, but I can't put a significance of impact on what he did today because I don't know that it mattered which back was in there.
How important is a game like this to be able, like you said, to get so many players and then continue to kind of build that chemistry with all the players?
I think the biggest thing is getting game experience. So who you play with doesn't matter as much if you play. And you probably went against somebody Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that was probably better than who you went against today. So I look a lot more at the practice reps we took last week than those. I want to see you perform when the anxiety hits and when the crowd's out there. But you know, we had guys go out there and got an opportunity and make mistakes, bust. They got to get those things out of the way. They got to get them out of the way. And the sooner we get them out of the way, the sooner they can become good players.
Coach Carson Branson Robinson is going through. What did it mean you to see him find the end zone today?
It's awesome. It's great. Branson works really hard. Branson's a good back, but still coming back to his old self. And I thought he had a good cut today and made some guys miss. He's right back, man. Just got to get back to full strength.
Yeah, Coach, right there before the half, you mentioned the 2 minute. What would you point to in terms of lack of execution right there that maybe didn't?
We just missed some open guys. I mean, whether it was the route was cut short, route was cut off, or Carson didn't hit them, but had good calls. They were open. Maybe the receiver pulled up short, or maybe we just missed him. But you know, we didn't have any timeouts, so it was a bonus to even get the ball back. And we went 3 and out, got the ball back. I wanted to see us execute without timeouts. We did a pretty good job of that. Got the 1 penalty, and once they had the defensive holding, I thought we'd be able to steal some points, but we didn't.
5 touchdown passes for Carson Beck today. I think it was tied the school record. Just what have you seen in his growth in just these past 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've seen him grow in the last 2 games. You know what I mean? I think just truly honestly, he's grown. He's a good player. He continues to get better. And it's not that you're saying he can't get better. Absolutely, he can get better. But today was about a lot of other players, not about Carson.
Any update on Oscar?
Yeah, he had a slight ankle sprain. So we'll see. You know, I thought he could have gone, but he held him at halftime.
Any update on Warren River?
Wasn't able to go today. Hopefully we get him back.
Nate Frazier with
Yeah, he could have come back and we ended up holding him. I'm not even sure it was a shoulder, but I don't know what significance. They came over to me and said he's ready to go back in, but at that point we were moved on.
Jordan Thomas.
All right, so good news there as it relates to Nate Frazier. Kirby Smart just saying he could have gone back into the game. Obviously, you mentioned the fact that Warren Brinson held out there in that spot, something that Georgia fans, I think, were in anticipation of. And then mentioning an ankle sprain, the word was from Kirby Smart on Oscar Delp. That's the one you probably watch going into the week there because Delp, the most experienced of the Georgia tight ends, I think one of the best tight ends in the country. We'll watch that more closely throughout the week there, and obviously better update probably on that coming on Monday. But Smart does call it, I believe, ankle sprain. That was the phrase that we got there on that. We got Kaylee Mansell live with us. We're going to get her. We've also got Jeff Sentell standing by there as well. Jeff is a part of our DawgNation Postgame show. Before we get into a couple of recruiting notes from you, give us your thoughts on – okay, we don't have Jeff ready, so we'll get Kaylee Mansell here. Had a chance to spend some time there with the Tennessee Tech locker room there. How did the Golden Eagles feel about the game today against Georgia?
I mean, I think head coach Bobby Wilder handled it as best as he could. It was just me, one more, and him. He walks in, he goes, Kirby Smart, everyone. My eyes light up. I was like, oh, he's making a joke. Okay, clearly he's taking this well. My first question to him is, why go for the field goal at the end? I mean, you got to ask.
Did you ask him that?
I did.
What did he say?
He said they needed the points. Like, he looked at what happened with Ole Miss and what happened with other schools. He was like, 48-3 looks a lot better than 70-0.
Good for you for asking that, because we've had some folks in our comment section today, including Davin Bellamy a moment ago, not happy about the fact that the somewhat meaningless field goal ruined the shutout. But he makes no apologies of, hey, we came here to try to score. We're going to try to score even if it's essentially meaningless. We're going to try to find some points because they're meaningful to us.
Yeah, and he said you never know when you're going to have to use a situation like that later down the road. He knew a lot of people wouldn't be happy about the decision, but he had full confidence in it. Another thing that he talked about, I asked him if there was any surprises that he saw from this UGA team. He talks about the height and the weight at the line of scrimmage. It's one thing to see the numbers listed on the roster, then you see it in person. He said that Georgia is the most impressive team he's ever seen in person, and this is somebody who has coached at the FBS level. He said you can Sentell, that Kirby Smart has them NFL ready, and just the professionalism on the sideline speaks volumes as well. And then I think another thing that he touched on that applies not to just college football, but high school football here in the state of Georgia. So many players on the Tennessee Tech roster from the state of Georgia. He said that a lot of the good offensive linemen come from here in the state, and he knows when he gets a player from the state of Georgia, they're going to come in ready, come in prepared, and are going to play meaningful snaps.
So Kaylee Mansell doing a great job with our DawgNation pregame coverage. You see her there. And don't forget, Jittery Joe's in the downtown Athens location before every UGA home game. You can stop by. You can see Kaylee there. Obviously, throughout the week, DawgNation at large. That show's blowing up. You're doing a great job. Thanks for stopping by and being a part of our show here today.
No, anytime. Anytime you'll have me. Anytime I can physically make it, I'll be here.
Poor Kaylee last week was trying to get over here to our show after the Dabo Swinney press conference. Not quite as eager to speak Dabo was last week.
I was eager to hear what he had to say, but you're right. He was not that eager to speak.
All right, that's good stuff there from Kaylee Mansell. Jeff Sentell also stands by here there as well. Jeff, there's a couple of recruiting questions we want to ask you, but obviously big Georgia win, at least by the margin of victory, to talk about before that. What did you think from the field? Your vantage point is certainly different than mine during a game. What did you think of what you saw from Georgia down there on that field here today?
Yeah, man, Brandon, good to be with you. I guess it was handle business type win there. I thought everybody, I think even the biggest contrarian would have to be enthused by the way Georgia started, the electricity, the big shots right there, Carson Beck, Anthony Evans. And then, Brandon, it became what we've seen a while now. We've seen a while now, maybe the biggest drama in the second half, in the fourth quarter especially, is Georgia going to get the shutout, or the backup's going to be able to keep them off the board? And then, as so often happens, somebody gets a late score or a late field goal to take that goose egg off the board.
Yeah, it seems like there's been so many of those games where, whether it be, Davin Bellamy was talking about this earlier, the Florida game in 2017, where we were watching that closely, and everything that's happened since then, that's become a pretty common occurrence overall. Obviously, Tennessee Tech does get the score, but, my overall takeaway in the Georgia defense, we've had a couple of folks mention the fact that, you do allow 100 yards rushing today. That's not very customary for Georgia. But overall, I think a major storyline for the first two games, one very real opponent, a top 15 ranked team, one not so impressive opponent, and frankly even less than most FCS teams that come in here. I think the story through two games is the fact that this Georgia defense seemingly does want to get back to being stingy again this year, the way that it was in recent years. Am I making too much the fact that there is a little bit of that kind of saltiness in this group, maybe in a way that didn't always exist in 2023? Is that saying too much to say it that way?
Yeah, you know what, Brandon, most of the players were asked the question after the game in the post-game presser about, is this a performance? Is this a start where you guys can start thinking you got something? And they all just felt it was like really too early, Brandon. When the game I was watching, I really saw Tennessee Tech really not try to do too much. I think they wanted to keep the training wheels on, Brandon. I think there was one sequence where they ran the ball like 22 straight times. Man, they go 5 out of 8 for, I believe, 18 yards passing today, Brandon. I'm sure Kirby Smart said in his post-game press conference that he didn't like giving up 118 yards on the ground, 116 yards on the ground. So, a lot of it, you've got to see so many new faces, and that's what Georgia is. It's the starters. It's the guys that are the key reserves, and then the rest of it, Brandon, you've got a lot of guys that are playing their first real meaningful football for the University of Georgia. I was impressed by seeing some of those young freshmen. Jordan Thomas got his first sack. And, and overall, Brandon, I think it kind of rounds out the performance for me, where Georgia has reached the point where, Carson throws for 5 touchdowns in a 48-3 win, something like that. And it's kind of really just hoorah, not really a big headline at all that your quarterback throws 5 touchdowns and no interception.
No, that's exactly right. Tying that school record, really delivering it to 5 different receivers. A very beautiful thing to be able to see. Jeff, before we do the recruiting stuff here, you also have a vantage point for a couple of the injury concerns that have been mentioned here today. Kirby Smart letting us know a moment ago, I guess the word is sprained ankle on Delp. What was your eyewitness account of the immediate aftermath of that from him? Kirby also lets us know that Nate Frazier could have gone back in. What did you see from those two injuries? And I guess anything else on the Georgia health front? We did have video of Mikael Williams in a walking boot today before the game. So that was obviously an eyewitness account. We were also able to bring you here today, too. What can you tell us about the overall health situation for Georgia based on what you were seeing from watching the game on the UGA sideline?
Yeah, I think the headline on the injury front, Brandon, I guess you got to start with Delp. I saw Delp. I had a pretty good eyeball on it. Delp came out of the locker room early in the second half. He didn't look like he was limping much at all, Brandon. He had a pair of kind of tennis shoes on, like he was going to go run like 3 or 4 miles. He was walking, pretty aptly. There wasn't no gingerness to his step or to his pace. I think the other thing to think about there is you've got, I think I tweeted out something about Mikael Williams and how I think that's now the most important walking boot in the state of Georgia for the next 3 or 4 weeks. And, he looked kind of ginger, Brandon. It looked like a guy that's still at least a couple of weeks away. He was kind of moving under his own power, but he definitely was a little uneasy with it. He walked all up and down. I bet his pedometer meant that he walked up and down this sideline a couple of times. He wasn't backing off it or anything. And you see Jordan Hall there, Brandon. I thought Jordan Hall looked pretty nimble and pretty much closer to go than like Mikael Williams would right there. And the other thing, you saw a couple of guys in knee rollers. I didn't even know that Marcus Harrison, the freshman offensive tackle, had suffered something, but he's been in a knee roller as well. And that's kind of the injury report right now as I talk.
So let's get a couple of recruiting notes here. First of all, it's interesting to see at least I guess based on reports, a Georgia recruiting target committed elsewhere, Christian Gass, the linebacker. Sounds like he was on campus here today. I believe there was some chatter that Usmani Croma was here today. You talked about that with us on Friday. What can you tell us about Georgia recruits who were in the building for Georgia and the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles here today?
Yeah, you probably took the headlines right there. You kind of dialed them up. Usmani Croma, fresh out of the visit to Auburn that went very well and got some crystal balls. He was in the house. He tells me his decision is going to come this month, so he might just go check out Florida State and then make his decision in the coming weeks. Perhaps the biggest name there were two, Brandon. I know it wasn't a good day for Georgia Tech. You probably already recognized that on your program. I know you recognize it on your social media feed, but Demola Ajunda, the offensive tackle out of Duluth, he had a front row seat today, the Georgia Tech offensive line commitment. That was very interesting. Christian Gass, the UT commitment, was also there. And then you had this smattering of commitments that were in town. You saw, obviously, Ethan Barbour was there. Landon Roldan, freshman, a 5-touchdown performance in a rivalry game last night against Clark Central. He was in the house. He had a front row seat. Isaiah Gibson had a front row seat as well, Brandon. But I'm going to be dutiful and objective in my reporting and say that the recruiting crowd that was there for the first half probably dimmed to about 15% of what they had after halftime, and they were all eating snacks and they were all watching ball games in the recruiting lounge after that beefy first half lead.
Hey, all that means is they're just smart guys, right? Because if you get a chance to get a good meal and watch some good football, perhaps that's the best use of your time anyway. There's one more recruit I want to ask you about here in a moment who was unfortunately not at Georgia today. Doesn't sound like. Sounds like he was somewhere else. Before that, though, let's also give some congratulations out to Carson Beck, who for the second week in a row takes home the game ball. I guess I have no real beef with this. I'm not quite so sure who else would have gotten it if not for Beck. Obviously, tying a school record for touchdowns seems like a fair use of a game ball here. So 2 weeks in a row for Beck, walking away with our game ball, courtesy of Serve Pro. Congratulations to Carson for that. And obviously, when Carson Beck's playing the way that he did today, things aren't too messy here around UGA, but if you've got a mess to clean up, fire damage, water intrusion, something like that, our friends at ServPro, their restoration specialists, want to get your property back to its original condition. They want to make it look like it never even happened. That's what ServPro is all about. So please find them online, servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com. One more time, SERV, servpro.com. And congratulations to Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, now 2 for 2 for the second week in a row. He is our game ball winner, courtesy of Serve Pro. So, Jeff, I'm watching the game today. I'm minding my own business in a good mood, feeling good about a lot of different things. And lo and behold, I have to see some, interruption to my feed. Is it true Justice Terry goes to Tuscaloosa today to visit Alabama? I think the thing that you're going to think about this, and I'm half kidding when I say this, but look, it's, weak opponent for Georgia against Tennessee Tech, but it's only South Florida for Alabama here today. A lot of Tide fans going to try to claim some measure of victory getting Terry on campus, especially when it feels like to a lot of Georgia fans, the tangible momentum, the best we can tell, kind of relates to Georgia here on this. What can you tell us to make us feel a little bit better about Justice Terry being in Tuscaloosa and not in Athens here today?
Brandon, I wish I could tell you some things that would make you feel a lot better about this situation. Here's what I can tell you. This was a planned trip to Tuscaloosa. And Brandon, my man, he did just take 2 straight trips, 2 out of 2 possible trips to see the Dogs play. He's seen as many Dogs play before Dog games in the year 2024 as you have, my friend, prior to today. He told me a while back he was going to take a visit to Tuscaloosa for the South Florida game. Remember, he said he wanted to give Georgia his first look during the regular season. And Brandon, he's already told me he's going to be back in Tuscaloosa on September the 28th to see Georgia play Tuscaloosa again. So he's going to take 2 really quick trips to Tuscaloosa in the month of September. So that's really when, that's something he's had on his agenda for a while, and something to monitor. Obviously, I'm sure there's some Alabama fans that were harping and crowing and making a big deal about it, but this is one that had been planned for a long time.
So 2 quick questions, then we'll let you go. A, and it seems like you've already confirmed this. This is not a surprise, then. You're calling this a planned visit. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about that? Actually, let me just ask you that, and I'll ask you the second question. So it sounds like, then, to your eyes, not a surprise to see Terry in Tuscaloosa today, then.
Now, Terry told me like 2 weeks ago he was going to see Georgia first. Georgia was going to get the first look. He felt that they deserved that. Remember, he saw him at G-Day, and then he saw him for the opener against Clemson. He had a smashingly good time watching the Dogs do the same to Clemson, and he's going to see Tuscaloosa again on the 28th for Georgia and Alabama as well.
Most important question here, on the basis of these multiple visits to Tuscaloosa, obviously also seeing Georgia play multiple times too, is it fair to say this is still a contested recruitment then?
Yeah, you got to call it contested. I think, especially Brandon, he's going to take this thing. He's very clear in acknowledging to me that he's going to take that thing all the way to December 4th. I don't know how much of your vast audience knows about that, but the early signing day, they're trying to get it out of the mess there with transfer portal after the conference championships and then the college football expanded playoff. The early signing period now starts on December the 4th, Brandon. That's usually about 2 weeks earlier than the norm right there. And I think it's going to be kind of a constant evaluation for Justice Terry with Alabama. And, I guess you got to throw Florida State in there too. That's a school that he considered amongst his final group as well. He said he hears from Texas. He hears a little bit from Auburn, but I'd say the principals to me, if we had to arm wrestle over it, and I would probably say the principals are definitely Georgia and Alabama in that recruitment.
Jeff, really good stuff. We'll obviously read plenty more from you at DawgNation.com. We'll catch up with you from the field next week in Lexington, Kroger Field, if you will, as Georgia gets ready to start its SEC play against the Wildcats next week. Thanks for being here on the DawgNation Postgame Show today, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Hey, Brandon, one more nugget to add. Obviously, I'm sure you've covered that 5 touchdowns went to 5 different receivers. That's awfully sporty to spread it around. And really, if I had to say the number one kind of moment of the post-game interaction with the players, Brandon, they were all just really happy and delighted to see Branson Robinson continue his comeback and get in the end zone. So there was a lot of goodwill for their teammate after this win today.
No, I think that's really well said, Jeff. Great. We talked about that a little earlier. Just a real feel-good story to get him back on the field today and finding the end zone. You certainly love to see that. So, Jeff, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, Brandon. Have a good night.
And with that, we'll get ready to transition now to cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Updates around the SEC, games in progress here right now. And I think nothing you can say here but a couple of pretty significant surprises as it relates to SEC teams in action at the moment. Auburn playing as about a 2-touchdown favorite today against the Cal Golden Bears. This was a game last year in Berkeley, closer than it was supposed to be, although Auburn did escape with victory. They may not be that lucky today in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Very unusual to see Auburn playing poorly at home, but as of right now, that's what they're doing, mustering just 7 points here in the early stage of the fourth quarter, and right now it is Cal leading at Auburn 14-7. But an even bigger surprise takes us to Lexington, Kentucky. That's the site that Georgia obviously be next week, where South Carolina came in today as a double-digit point underdog. And yet right now they lead in the late stages of the third quarter 24-6. I think Dylan Stewart's already had a big day. Sounds like Brock Vandagriff has had his struggles. So when it comes to SEC games ongoing here at the moment, obviously a couple of surprises coming into the SEC there on that. Ole Miss right now, no trouble with Middle Tennessee State. This is a team that put up 70 points last week against Furman, 70+, and now 31-3 as the second half gets ready to begin there against Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State, the team that did beat but struggled with Tennessee Tech last weekend. And in one of the heartbreaking games, and obviously Georgia fans certainly like Sam Pittman, I think that Arkansas fans now may not be liking him very much anymore. A lead all day long, at times by 2 touchdowns, a huge advantage in total yardage when it comes to the sum total, and yet Arkansas ends up going to overtime with Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State gets the win, 39-31. If you care about point spreads, this was also a backbreaker too. Arkansas State was a 7.5-point underdog. They were winning the game virtually the entirety of the game, and ended up not only letting Oklahoma State win, but Oklahoma State, after a 2-point conversion in overtime, gets the cover. Just an absolute kick in the gut to anybody who had Arkansas plus 7.5 right there. And of course, the big story from games earlier, Texas does go on the road in a spot against the defending national champs where I think a lot of folks wondered, can you trust Texas here? Are you really ready to give up on Michigan here? And certainly Michigan did not look the part of the defending national champions. Texas, certainly by virtue of the sizable win, clearly letting it be known that they're going to be a formidable challenger here in the SEC, including for Georgia coming up in the month of October. The only other final from the SEC here today saw Texas A&M no trouble with whoever it was they played. 52-10 was the final there. The Aggies getting a win, and of course after losing to Notre Dame last week, I guess they can't be complaining too much about that. Obviously now getting to 1-1 on the season. That is cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I'll look at those scores, and if you care about games going to take place here tonight, obviously a lot of folks will be watching Charlotte later on this evening, 7:30 start time there for that, as Tennessee takes on NC State. You've got a battle between the Big 12 and the SEC very late tonight, Mississippi State going out to Arizona State. And, of course, Oklahoma, after a blowout win last Friday night against Houston, against Temple, looking forward to taking on Houston there as well. But the score that matters to you here is Georgia 48-3 over the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles. And as we get ready to wrap up our cruise around the SEC, so nice to see so many folks around here today. And every time they would come up to me, one of the things we heard so much is, BA, we're going to try to be on that DawgNation cruise in April. We want to be there. We want to do that. We want to be a part of that because I hear you talking about Utopia of the Seas, and I'd love to have that experience just like everybody else is going to have. And I always say the same thing. You're going to have a great time if you get that chance to come and be a part of that wonderful cruise with us. And you don't have to wait till April to get the best of Utopia of the Seas, the best at anything that Royal Caribbean has to offer here right now. You can get all of that. Our friend Jessica Slater can tell you how. Here's the cool thing about Royal Caribbean is that they want your vacation experience to be as great as it possibly can be. They want your vacation experience to be as great as it possibly can be. That means they want a terrific travel agent to help you plan all of that. That's what Jessica Slater is. You can give her a call, number you see on the screen. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She can get you booked up, whether it's the DawgNation cruise in April or anything else. She'll get that for you here today. You can do that with her. She'll get you ready to go. All right, before we get ready to say goodbye, come on over here for a second. Got to do this just for a second. So a lot of y'all see me every single day. course, you know how much my family means to me. I got to take one quick second here at the end of the show to say hello to my wife. Today is my wife's birthday. She spent it taking my kids to the game, taking care of stuff around the house. She's basically she's essentially a single mom this time of year because I'm never home because of football season. But she does so many great things and always having a good time. And so I just wanted to say happy birthday and thanks for being thanks for everything. So we wanted to give her a good happy birthday message here. So happy that she was able to come to the game. Happy to have my kids here today there as well. So a good time for them and hopefully a happy birthday meal coming up for our whole family here in honor of my wife, who certainly deserves all of that. Hey, thanks to all of you for being here, part of our DawgNation Postgame show today. I'll see you Monday for DawgNation Daily. If you want to get all of the press conference coverage, whether it be Georgia players, whether it be Kirby Smart, you get that at the DawgNation YouTube page. Want to go back rewatch Kaylee's show from this morning, you get that on demand there as well. And we'll see you next week, the same time, from Lexington to Kentucky for our DawgNation Postgame show. From the UGA bookstore, we're saying bye for now, though. Have a great weekend, everybody.